Thanks for attending our talk. We imagine you'll be exhausting after these very intense but very exciting days. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about how we have navigated exhausting but really exciting times and how we made it through more or less alive.
Yeah, so a bit about us. We are Carmen Iniesta and Onielfa. We are both machine learning engineers at Progress. We both work on many of the problems you are also working on, such as document extraction, search, retrieval-augmented generation, and nowadays also agentic systems. We started working together at Nuclea, which was a startup that was focused on intelligent search back in 2019, and it evolved with the technology. We are now part of Progress since last year, and we are part of the product Progress Agentic Rack. And we are building production-grade software as a service rack.
Okay, well, please don't hallucinate. If you hallucinate, I will lose my job. This is a bit old, so now we don't have prompts that extreme, but like, have some of you had to manipulate a language model emotionally to get what you wanted? I know you have, so. And did it feel weird as an engineer used to building deterministic system or as a data scientist? Because at least for us, it was a lot to navigate. So let's start from the beginning. So a lot of you, from what I've seen from the conference, have been around enough to like be familiar with more traditional search approaches, more classic NLP pipelines, and it was a time where we were building systems that were more reliable, less powerful, but also more deterministic, like, I don't know, smaller transformer models, regex, like things had more explainability. And suddenly LLMs arrived and things started changing.
Yeah, for sure. And they were exciting times, but we started with LLMs that were not that capable. They had tiny context windows. They were not so great at instruction following, which made us use those questionable techniques like this emotional prompting and our kinds of like threats and prayers. Yeah, I'm not proud of some of the prompts that I used to do back in the day. And of course, the hallucinations, which were like commonplace back in the day. Now it's a bit better with all of this stuff, but we'll show that there's still some room for improvement.
Okay, so things started moving quickly and we started adapting, but like the pace of it was insane. And so not only new models were coming and breaking things, but also these fragile prompts that you've seen were breaking from like one model version to another because suddenly nobody respected any kind of backwards compatibility. And that also applied to APIs, like things were constantly changing and breaking. And as engineers, this was mind-boggling. So also, on top of that, each provider has its own way of doing things. Now, OpenAI is kind of like the de facto standard, but for a while, it was absolute chaos. And talking about chaos, like there were like providers that were changing libraries. I don't know if anyone has gone through like the path of Vortex, Gemini API, Google Gen AI, but we went and it was not nice time.
No, for sure. And taking into account that we are delivering this in production for clients that actually need this to work, this added a whole nother level. For instance, these models that are being released, we have new versions coming, and of course, old ones are getting removed as well. And that's something that you have to take into account. This is a sign that things are stabilizing, but there's still a lot of change. And of course, also this change or these notices of model deprecations arrive via email maybe, so you better hope you don't miss that email or your model might stop working suddenly one day. And there's also the fact that we rely on third-party providers for compute and for inference, and that makes it so that we are bound by their rate limits. Some providers actually tell you what your rate limit is, and you can dimension accordingly. Some others just tell you your limit is dynamic, and you'll get what you'll get. And building a production system around that, it's hard. And finally, also, this is changing technology, it requires a lot of compute, there's a lot of demand, and that makes it so that many LLM providers are super unreliable. I can show you our dashboards on any day, and I'm sure one provider has gone down at some point.
Okay, so we are talking about a lot of models, a lot of model versions, like there's a new fancy model every week. And we hear a lot of people talking about evaluation. So shall we trust leaderboards? Shall we trust benchmarks? So how do we navigate this? So in our case, for example, there was like a new captioning model, like these ones that you provide an image and they give you a description. And we were about to put it into stage because it was like top of the leaderboards, it was fast, shiny, new, and like everything we tried at the beginning worked great. And then this is one description that it generated. It sounds nice, it sounds even poetic. But the problem is that the image that it was representing was this one. So that was a bit frustrating. So because we did have like a very strong evaluation and testing system, we detected this before going into production. And it would have not been very nice to put this on a vector database on a search engine because it can result in like horrible stuff. I mean, not horrible, but like undesired.
Yeah, totally. This is one of the times where 90% accuracy is just not enough. If a client sees this, they will like scream, what is this? So yeah, so from this, some conclusions we draw, and they are increasingly reinforced as time goes on, is that leaderboards and benchmarks should serve as a fallback. You ideally should have an evaluation over your own system. And the truth is that it brings a lot of positives. For starters, you are able to use it over data that's really relevant to your use case or your client use cases, and you can put it through the system and really get measurable scores and numbers that really matter. And also, as a nice bonus, you might be able to get information about bugs that you could probably not detect otherwise. I mean, it's one thing to detect a bug that crashes your system, that's easy. But one bug that drops performance by 20%, that's a bit harder.
So well, besides all of this noise of models coming, benchmarks and everything, there's like, how do we know which direction to take? How do we know which papers to read? Which like articles to trust? So at some point we were going a bit crazy. It felt like we were doing LinkedIn-driven development. It felt exhausting to see every other week a rag is dead article. I don't know if anyone has felt the pain, but we did. And we were just like getting a bit stressed about it and not knowing how to go, and like the risk of like reacting to all of these inputs can really get your engineers overwhelmed, lost, and just wasting a lot of time and energy.
Yeah, totally. And one of the key things that help us through this is having what we call a research committee. It's a meeting in which we meet with other people in the company and also meet with external consultants, which their task is to go through these papers. Like, we send them papers, they go through them, they summarize it, they separate what's like good and what's actually like not worth our time. And even if it's makes sense, we will do a deep dive and really go down to brass tacks on some articles. And also, I would point, and something to take into account is that do not follow these trends blindly, evaluate them yourself before adopting them, and let's be real, like sometimes this moves at a pace in which you're actually like evaluating while adopting, but you still need to do your best to evaluate stuff. And also as some takeaways, like if you follow the hype, follow the trends, you'll have a product that has the latest buzzword, which is like relevant for this conference, but it's having the latest buzzwords is not solving a real problem. You have to focus your product onto something that's really solving what the client needs, and that means building on your principles, and that will bring you additional resilience and additional trust with your client.
Well, I'm talking about clients. The ecosystem is not the only thing that changed. Also, the client expectations, because at the same time that we were adopting all of these new technologies, that we were integrating LLMs in our development, clients were also integrating them in their lives. So for us, there's like very different three phases. Like at the beginning, pre-reasoning, like people were doing their first steps with ChatGPT, everything seemed magic. They didn't understand why it worked, but they wanted it to work all the time for sure. And it was just like a bit of like a confusing time to navigate, and everything needed to be really fast because search had always been fast. So why is it not fast anymore? And then it came reasoning. And I think it was mentioned in both of the panels yesterday. I think it was Atita and Philip that said that like suddenly people were patient magically. So yeah, we also saw that like suddenly people were okay with waiting a bit for the answer, but it needed to be the perfect answer. So they were like less flexible with the quality, but more flexible with the time. And then a new level of magic arrived, agentic. So everybody's integrating like agents in their life, even us coding, and this changes how we approach a lot of stuff. And now everything needs to be magic, but also connected to everything. We don't want failures, we don't want anything. And this also leads to a whole new set of problems.
Yeah, totally. No, like the first thing is that this sets, I would say, unreasonable expectations. Like we as humans can think about intelligence as a global term. You either like have it or you don't. But the reality is that for these models is very, very domain specific. It's completely different if your task falls in domain or if it doesn't. I mean, I'm sure you've seen all the posts of people saying, actually, don't use your custom tools. The terminal is much better. I mean, of course, it has been trained to use the terminal. It doesn't know about your tools. It's normal that this happens. And I guess also like the strategy for the research labs has also been to make it so that nothing is out of domain, and that's also what makes it seem so magical. But there's no magic happening there. Like the out of domain still exists, and it's much more probable that your client's use case, your client's tools, or your client's data falls in that out of domain, and you'll have to explain to your client also that what he sees on cloud code does not translate to their use case. And as an example on this, there was a client using our extraction pipeline with a feature that enabled smart OCR, so it used a frontier model to go through the page and extract the text. And they had some custom rules, and they were asking, it's not working, it's crashing sometimes. Could you check what's happening? And okay, I'll check. And for example, one of the documents that was failing, it was extracting Markdown, okay, a header, then some text, and then this looks to be the start of an image in Markdown. I'm sure you're familiar with it. This will be the alternative text, and after this bracket, what we should have is like the image URL, or yeah, the image itself. And of course, when I looked into what was happening here, I saw this. This looks to be the image in base 64. But how is this possible? I mean, has the model provider implemented something that lets it like crop the image and take this specific region on the image and add it? I was going crazy, right? She
He
can be a
was
witness
going
to that.
crazy.
Turns out the model is just hallucinating this data. Like the client told it to extract images. The model is not capable of extracting those images, so it just added this base 64 data until it filled the maximum tokens and crashed. So yeah, how do we survive in all this? In summary, as a conclusion, like the first one is that there's a lot of noise, but sifting through the noise is necessary if you want to be able to do stuff. If you focus your attention towards something, towards everything, you end up doing nothing. You need to sift through that noise. Then that testing is non-negotiable. You need to have some testing before diving into stuff, or you're risking like following into the next trend and not actually delivering. Then of course, there's an additional point that's super nice to have, and that's continuous evaluation. As you modify your system, your pipeline, you add more stuff, it's nice to track how it changes with those new technologies. And in our case, we trained a small language model in order to evaluate RAG, and we ended up plugging it into the system so that it evaluates every single user query. That makes it so that each client can know how their pipeline is doing, and also us can track any regressions in performance and just generally be alert on that kind of stuff. Also, yeah, calling back to one of the first things I said about model deprecations, and one thing that's a must as well is having that model migration in consideration when you define your system. Everywhere you use an LLM, take into account that it might be changing the next month. And therefore, we have even set up like a deprecation calendar. We're preparing for those deprecations. We inform our clients that they're going to be happening, so they have time to migrate to the new model and test their prompts. Because otherwise, it's crazy. And then finally, you should also be properly and transparently communicating errors to your clients, because sometimes or most of the times it's possible that the failure is on the LLM side. It's a non-deterministic system. It's an unreliable provider. Maybe you need to also communicate that to the client and make them part of this whole pipeline and make them understand what's happening behind the scenes. And yeah, as engineers, I think this could be the hardest part, or at least it is for me. We are living under constant change, and what you implement today might be outdated by tomorrow. So you have to make peace with the fact that your code might be at some point commented out, and once you're ready, delete it.
Okay, we've talked about the engineering side, but in the opening talk yesterday, Paul mentioned how important it is human connection now more than ever in these like unsettled times. So let's not forget about this. Like obviously, teams, management, companies need to put system into place to make sure that engineers, data scientists, people working in this environment are not getting burned out very fast, are not getting like super stressed. They need to check on people's load, people's mental health. But us as colleagues and even as a community need to check on each other to make sure that everybody's doing fine, everybody's like coping with the stuff. And like also one thing that like we cannot forget is joy, because yeah, we do this for work because we need to be realistic, but most of us also do this because we're passionate about it. And one of the worst things that can happen when you get too stressed, when you get burned out, is that you lose joy. So it's vital to keep finding these places of discussion at work, out of work, where you can explore other topics, discuss about things that you're excited about. Places like this where you can share stuff with the community, it's getting like more crucial than ever at the pace that we work. And well, to finish, to sum up, like we need to make peace with the fact that we live in an uncertain industry. But what we can do is we can try to engineer how much it hurts the system, the product, and it hurts us.
So yeah, this has been our talk. Thank you all for listening. And if you want to talk to us, you'll find us around here. Well, the conference doesn't have long, but we'll be here. And yeah, if you want to chat with us via LinkedIn, we are right there. Feel free to scan the code, and maybe if enough people are interested, we can start some group therapy session. Who knows?
And thanks for listening and for the patience. It's late, it's one of the last talks, it's after lunch. So yeah, we know it's painful, but thank you.
Do I see any questions now? I know it's late. I know it's the last thing. But maybe somebody has a good question after the talk.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the talk. Awesome. What you saw in the company, in the evolution of trying different models and the reaction of the governance of the company, of what you were doing to get to the new models or to eager try to the new models or you wanted to stay calm and do one thing first correctly on one model and then ignore the others.
Okay, I can start. I can start. I can start.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I forgot you didn't have a mic. So you need to take into account that now we are part of a bigger company, but for a while, 3 years in my case, we were part of a startup. So we didn't have the luxury of being slow. We needed to be as fast as possible and try to integrate all of this evaluation. That's why Carla said evaluation sometimes while doing it, because we didn't have that luxury. Like we were trying to like, without losing focus, but like trying to keep up to date with as many things as possible and make the product as current and as relevant as possible.
Yeah, and maybe to add about the LLM side as well, like there was times that releasing the new LLM was nice because then there could be a LinkedIn post about the product supporting the latest LLM, but then you maybe like adopt a policy where maybe we will not be showcasing like preview models because they are even more unreliable. But then there's stuff like the Gemini 3 release, which was in preview for several months. So there's no right answer here.
Thank you very much again. Big round of applause for the last speakers.